Good morning, everyone. Today, I will present the economic impacts of free trade agreements, especially the case of Korea, Chile, FTA. My name is Jiyoung Kim, and my co-author, Dr. Ji-Sang Yu. We are from the Kansas State University. So after the Doha round, the regional or bilateral trade agreements have increased around the world. With the increasing number of the trade agreements, the economic impact of FTA become more important. So some studies find that increasing imports can reduce the profitability of the producers of the goods or the prices of the factors for the goods. In this situation, the South Korea was not an exception. Starting with the Korea-Chile FTA, Korea has 18 FTAs in effect with 58 countries in 2022. And after the opening of its agricultural market, the agricultural imports of Korea increased, while at the same time, its domestic production steadily decreased. So this makes us conjecture that Korea-Chile FTA may have negative influence on the production in Korea. So our research question is, does the Korea-Chile FTA affect the fruits and vegetable farm economy in South Korea? To investigate this question, we construct an individualized input shock variable and then directly estimate the impacts of the Korea-Chile FTA on the farm economy in South Korea using the farm level. So why did we choose the Korea FTA and consider the fruits and vegetable farms in Korea? As I mentioned before, the Korea-Chile FTA is the first FTA for South Korea. And the major agricultural commodity imported from Chile is fresh grape, and which is one of the top 5 fruits consumed in Korea. And on top of that, Chile has also growing seasons to Korea, so Chilean grapes can substitute for the fruits, including grapes and other vegetables in Korea. This graph shows the trends in the annual agricultural imports of Korea from the world. Both total agricultural imports and the grapes imports increased from 2004. And when you look at the trends in the annual agricultural imports from Chile, you can check the fresh grape imports increased highly from 2004. So in this research, we use the Farm Household Economic Survey data. This data is annual panel data, but the survey samples and identifiers change every 5 years. So this means we only have 5-year annual panel data. So we focus on the period from 2003 to 2007 to include the before and after FTA. And since not all samples consistently exist in our data, so we restrict our samples to the farms appeared in 2003 and 2004, and then 2006 and 2007. Then we combine this panel data with the import data, and then all values are exchanged for Korean won and deflated to 2003 Korean won as real values. The key challenge is to individualize the import shock to capture the effect of the FTA on individual farms. So using the shift share concept from the author et al. 2013, we compute the individualized import shock by the following equation. In this equation, the fraction indicates the share of individual farm revenue to the national level of farm total revenue, and then we multiply action by the difference in fruits and vegetable imports between pre and post FTA. In this research, we define the pre-FTA means as the average of 2003 and 2004, and then the post-FTA as the average of 2006 and 2007. Moving on to the descriptive statistics for our key variables. In pre-FTA period, the real total crop revenue is 22 million Korean won, and it's almost $20,000. So when you look at this statistics, after the FTA, the real crop revenue increased, and when you look at the share of fruits and vegetable sales, this share, the crop revenue decreased and the share increased. And then we built a simple equation to investigate how import shock affect individual farms' crop revenue and income and labor cost. The dependent variable is the difference in the difference. So, for example, the difference in crop revenue is equal to the average of crop revenue in 2006 to 2007, and minus the average of crop revenue in 2003 to 2004. And we use the share of fruits and vegetable sales as a control variable, and then both revenue and shock variables are transformed through the inverse hyperbolic sign transformation. So we transform these revenue and shock variables into the log form. In the result, we only get the significant coefficients when we control for the share of the fruits and vegetable sales. And both the import shock from the world and Chile have a negative impact on the crop revenue of the individual farms. Moreover, we do the same regression of farm income and labor costs, but the results are not significant. Then using a quantile regression approach, we estimate the conditional quantiles, this is also called as percentiles of the dependent variable. So we look at the 25, 50, and 75 percentiles. In the result, we see that the import shock from Chile has a negative impact on crop revenue, but only for 25 and 50 percentiles. The interesting point is that the magnitude of results decreases as the difference in the crop revenue moves from 25 to 75 percentiles. And this result suggests that there is heterogeneous effects on crop revenue. Next, we estimate how the fruits and vegetable shares respond to the import shock. Variable is the difference in the shares of fruits and vegetables between the two periods. Since already our dependent variable is shares, we only transform the individualized import shock using import hyperbolic sign transformation. And the result shows that the growth in imports, the growth in fruits and vegetable imports have negative impact on the production in fruits and vegetables, but the impact is relatively small. To conclude, using the comprehensive data set on farms and the individualized import shock, we find that the fruits and vegetable imports from Chile have a negative impact on the crop revenue and the share of fruits and vegetable sales. We have some limitations. there is more robust checks, and then there's no information on quantity of commodity in our data, so we can't capture the quantity effect. However, we find that the immediate impact is substantial, and the magnitude of adjustments to other crop is relatively small. Thank you for your attention. Do you have any questions or comments? Yes.
So do you consider any subsidy from the government in this matter?
Unfortunately, we didn't consider that. Yeah. In this research.
So it's not included in the revenues and receipts, so it's not included as the change in the deed. So subsidy is not, we're not controlling for subsidy, but also that's not part of the revenue that we're doing.
I'm just curious, you look at right now you're comparing the 2006-7, but if you look at the later years survey, example 8, 9, 10.
Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, our data is 5 years panel data, so the identifiers change it every 5 years, so we couldn't see the long term. Yeah.
Could be interesting if we can look at create a pseudo panel and have the treat that as a panel and see what happens over time. But then also we can look at the other FBA and the way it goes. It's a great idea.
Were you able to compare with other crops rather than just treated fruit or vegetables, so that you can really compare whether the FDA effect was?
You mean like rice or other?
Yeah, well, you can.
We thought that the major import commodity is grapes, and that could be substitutes for the fruits and vegetables. So we didn't consider other crops, but maybe we can, consider it, compare, other crops,
We created to actually have a more close to traditional chip share quantity ID type of variables so that we can capture all the other commodity imports. But the issue is it's unclear in terms of other commodities what's been imported from Chile. It's more processed and it's not a low cost something much. Fruits and so clear, whereas in most maturity others it's less clear how those other inputs affect the local production. So that's why we tried both ways, but this seems cleaner in this setup. But yeah, we have to think about other commodities. I don't think much actual commodity being imported from, at least in that period, from Chile, but we have to double check on that.
If you have no more questions, we can begin the second presentation by Yoko Yamasaki, Impact of Connection Products.
Or does it push it there?
Yes. So yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Yoko Yamasaki. I'm a PhD student at the University of Illinois, and today I will be presenting my paper, early stage paper, the impact of commercial crop expansion on the local people. Oh, I think I should here.
I think it's
already.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
thank you. Yes. It's always confusing. So, yes. So let's go. So, first of all, the motivation of this study is coming from one question, that is, what's the impact of agricultural commodity boom for developing countries? So we generally believe the international trade has benefited us. So one of the statement, for example, is that developing countries have been able to progress more quickly in terms of job growth, educational attainment, and infrastructural improvements. It could be true, right? But there are some arguments on commodity boom. So commodity boom is one of the consequences of the international trade, right? So the previous literature have focused on natural resources. That means commodity boom of the natural resources, and somehow found that there is a negative impact on human capital investment. That means, for example, educational investment, right? But how about the impact of agricultural commodity boom? That's the question. So the agricultural crops are obviously important commodities for developing countries. They export agricultural commodity to developed countries, right? And we have been experiencing so many agricultural commodity booms, such as palm oil, coconut oil, avocados, etc., right? So it's important to learn the impact of the agricultural commodity boom. But the problem is that within the country setting, it's hard to disentangle the causal effect of crop expansion because of the following reason. For example, wealthier communities produce more export crops than others because just because they can afford to have more good supply facilities and make themselves well equipped for the production, and thus have more production and thus become wealthier, right? If that's the case, we may have simultaneous causality problem, right? So in order to overcome this problem, my approach is to use the case of Cavendish expansion of the Philippines in RE 2000. I will talk about more about this first point later, but I use the fixed effect approach as a baseline, and I use IB models as a robustness check. And I'm looking at some important indicators for economic policies, such as wages, educational expenditures, and health status. And this is the summary of the results. But because of the expansion of the Cavendish, we experienced increase in the agricultural wages, but it's not true for the non-agricultural wages. It doesn't matter for the non-agricultural wages. And also Cavendish expansion increased infant death rate in Cavendish producing provinces. That's the big preview of the results. So now I will talk about my background. So what's the characteristics of the Cavendish banana industry? So first of all, it is the crop, plantation crop, right? So it is produced by big international plantation companies such as Dole or Chiquita, etc. And all the fresh bananas grown for export are of Cavendish variety. And virtually all Cavendish bananas are grown for export in the Philippines. That's the first point. And secondly, it is known as male-dominated industry. So one of the reports of the FAO states that men tend to be more present in large-scale banana production. That means Cavendish banana production for the international export market. This is true for the Philippines Cavendish industry as well. And finally, the production of Cavendish banana has been used, has used aerial spraying of pesticide. So, and it has been a big issue, argument in the Philippines and internationally as well. So for example, Davao City has tried to pass an aerial spraying ban of pesticide in 2007. And in response to this ban, international companies tried to or international companies filed a lawsuit against this ban. And in 2016, as a result, the Supreme Court struck down the double CD's ban. So as you can tell, this has been a big issue in the country. So next, please look at this figure. This is the whole banana production altogether, all the varieties. So this is from 1983 to 2019. And as you can see from this figure, there is a rapid increase from early 2000 to 2010. And in the country, in the Philippines, there are three major kinds of bananas. One is Lakatan, the orange one, and Sabal banana, and Cavendish. And if you look at this figure, you can tell that the rapid increase is only true for Cavendish. Other Lakatan and Sabal banana didn't change much during this time. And Sabal banana and Lakatan are produced in domestic and consumed in domestic as well. But Cavendish banana is one of the most traded crops in the world. And also the Philippines is one of the biggest exporter of the Cavendish production. And it is explained that this rapid increase is a reflection of the increase in the international demand. So Japan and South Korea are top two countries, importers of the Philippines Cavendish production. And as you can see from this figure, this is, you can see the rapid increase in the export values to Japan and South Korea. This is export values of the Cavendish production. So in summary, the Cavendish production, the main demand is outside of the country. So it does not really reflect the local demand because it's too expensive for local people to buy a Cavendish. For local people, Lakatan or Sabal banana are the ones who that consume. And secondly, each province differs in terms of the productive potential, that is agroclimate conditions. And international companies such as Dole or Tequila are the ones who select the places to produce in 1990s. And so it is unlikely that other factors such as which correlates with the local economic conditions decides production sites. So that's the second point. And finally, as you can see from the previous slides, there's a drastic increase in the volume of Cavendish production, which was driven by increasing international demand. I'm using this rapid increase to investigate the effect of having a commodity boom. So now I will explain the data that I'm using for this study. So for agriculture production, I use the country stat database of the Philippine Statistical Authority, PSSA, sorry. And for wages and other economic indicators, I use family income expenditure survey, which is the 5 waves of household level survey. But please note, this is not panel data, but it's repeated cross-sectional survey. So that means every year we have different households. Right? And finally, for infant death rate or outcomes, I use Philippine Health Statistics by the Department of Health, which is published every year from 2003 to 2019. It is a panel data and at the province level. So this analysis is at the province level. So now I will talk about the empirical strategy. So my starting point is the fixed effect approach like this. So in equation number 1, Cavendish JT, this one is a standardized Cavendish production in province J in year T. And standardized Cavendish production means I divided the production in metric tons by the province size in hectare. So it becomes the production per hectare in order to consider the province size, right? And I also include the baseline characteristics interacted with the year fixed effect, X prime, This allows provinces with different initial characteristics to be subjected to different time varying shocks. So and in addition to these control variables, province-specific time trend is controlled as a robustness check. And robust standard errors are clustered by provinces. But in addition to this equation number 1, I also run IB model as a robustness check. So equation number 2, is interaction between suitability time indicator is my instrumental variable. And suitability J is a suitability proxy. So this measure for the Cavendish production of province J. I use Cavendish production per line area in province J in 2002 as a proxy of the suitability. 2002 is a prior year of my baseline year, 2003. And I will talk more about the IB. So this is the graphical presentation of my suitability measure. Okay? And there are some reasons why I use this suitability measure as a part of instrumental variable. So first reason is that Cavendish production requires vast strategic plan and is operated by international companies, as I mentioned before. And secondly, by those large international companies, places to produce Cavendish bananas were chosen based on exogenous agroclimate conditions. And thus, international companies first started their production in places that were most suitable in 1990s. So that's a history of Cavendish production of Philippines. So my identifying assumption is that the interaction between Cavendish yield in 2002, this is the suitability measure, and the time indicator affect outcomes only through its effect on actual Cavendish production. That's my assumption for the IB. And this is the result of my regression. So the first row is my fixed effect model result. And the second row is my instrumental variable regression result. And by comparing those models, you can see that the magnitudes are almost relatively the same, stay the same. And also they have the same directions. And for wages and agricultural wages, we have significant positive coefficient. But this is not true for non-agricultural wages. We don't have any significant results. And so this table tells you the provinces that produce more Cavendish banana experience an increase in agricultural wages and deterioration of children's health. Infant rate decrease significantly. Okay, thank you. And this is the final result. But so now I divided the sample into 2 groups, depending on based on the gender ratio. So I define the province as male-dominated province if the gender ratio is greater than 1.08. And you can see that the effect of the positive effect of the expansion is only true for male-dominated provinces for agricultural wages, right? So this is the final regression result. So in conclusion, the results imply that agricultural wages went up because of the boom. And the effect differs depending on province's gender ratio. Because as I said before, the production industry is a male-dominated industry, and the production might cause health issues, the infant death rate. And we would need to be careful when we promote export crop production. And next step would be, I'm planning on extending this study by having DHS data to have female empowerment, gender differences in economic activities, and health outcomes. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. So if you have any comments or suggestions or questions, I appreciate.
So it was a great paper. I have one or two questions.
Yes.
First is, are you, so did you check for any structural traits, for example, as well as non-linearities? So you're seeing that as the production increases, it also results in increase in pitches. But it might be that that increase might be restricted. So there might be some marginal returns after some point. Any further increase in production might result, might result in no further increase in wages, because as the supply increases, there are demand factors also which we need to take into consideration.
Demand side effect. Oh, yes. That's a good question. I need to consider that. So the demand, but as I explained at the beginning of this presentation, for this cabinet production, because its main demand is outside of the country, so I really consider the demand side effects for this time. So I hope it's answered part of your questions, but I will think about that more. Thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah, so I have a couple of questions, slash comment, I guess. So your key explanatory variable is the Cavendish production divided by the equivalent side, right?
Yes, right.
So it's a little, I guess, unclear in a way that are we talking about more acres of planted bananas or more per tree or more trees per acre, right? So that's all sort of mixed in that measure. I see what you're trying to do in terms of leveraging that boom in production. So maybe kind of fine tuning that variable would be more convincing. So we could say that this, because of the boom they're pushing by planting more. I don't think there has been that much of yield growth in the banana production, but maybe I'm wrong. So it could be just productivity too. So that's one I guess comment.
Thank you.
The IV one, yeah, I can buy the 2002 share or the production size given province. But you're kind of forcing the year by year variation by interacting with time indicator.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a little bit unclear what that's doing, right? Time indicator. So we can argue one of those two are exogenous and we can use it, but what's that actually doing, right? The time indicator. So normally what, and this is kind of similar to the like Bartik IV, you have fixed share and then you kind of use the national aggregate, shop. So maybe use price other than indicator. Might be more convincing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is one of my idea as the IV, and to be very honest, I was also trying to use another IV, which was derived from FAO. And there is a data that directly measure the suitability.
Guys data.
Yeah, that's the one. But the thing is, it didn't really work at the first stage. It didn't really predict.
I think on this.
Yeah, so this is a kind of I still need to improve my IV, but this is kind of like our idea. But I will think about the idea of the price, international price, maybe. Yeah. Thank you so much for the comments. Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Maybe I missed it, but why did you use infant death rate as a variable?
Oh yeah, I didn't explain, but there's an argument about the aerial spraying of pesticide. If I have the picture, so this is what it looks like in the Philippines. So the guys are spraying the pesticide from the sky like this, and there is an argument done by FAO, especially. They are arguing that it have a negative effect for the children, especially because the children are playing outside and going to school. But the effect itself haven't really measured. So that is part of the reason why I include the unconscious rate, if that makes sense. Thank you for the question. I don't have any. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'll be presenting the paper on estimating supply elasticities for corn in the United States, accounting for prospective plantings. This paper is a joint work with Dr. Echemian and Dr. William Secker at the University of Georgia, and the work is supported by the USDA ARS cooperative agreement. However, the views in this presentation solely those of the authors and not necessarily of the USDA or the ARS. So I'll start with a brief executive summary. Several previous research articles have proposed different methods to estimate ag supply elasticities. Majority of them suggest using yield shocks as instruments. So they instrument for endogenous futures prices using lagged year yield shocks. I will discuss about what exactly a yield shock is in the further slides. In this paper, so we estimate supply elasticities using prospective plantings as well as actual acreage. The past literature has only included actual acreage when they're calculating agricultural supply elasticities. We are including both prospective plantings and actual acreage data. So what it does is it doubles our data set compared to the literature, providing us one additional data point for each year and improving the precision of our estimates. Overall, in this study, we find that the supply elasticity for corn is about 0.27%. The estimates in the literature lie around between 0.4 to 0.5%. And beyond estimating the supply elasticity, we also assess what was the welfare damage as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and compare that damage to the payments that USDA made under the coronavirus food assistance program. Our results show that USDA was able to fully compensate producers for any pandemic associated losses. Overall, our results provide supply elasticity for corn and also help in policy making. For example, how to compensate farmers when there are adverse events such as they trade for or the COVID-19 pandemic. In the literature, Hendricks et al. In the 2014 report in estimating supply elasticity is commented because demand shifters are very difficult to observe. Even if we observe those demand shifters, they're coming from individual consumers, so they have very little explanatory power when they have to explain price variations. So that's why it's difficult to estimate agricultural supply elasticities. And it's very important to estimate these supply elasticities because it helps in agricultural policy analysis. So in this paper, there have been some recent demand shocks, for example, the COVID-19 pandemic, which impacted the demand for automobile fuel and as a result for ethanol and biofuels. Because corn is used for the production of ethanol, the demand for corn also decreased. Similarly, there was a trade war. And as a result of the trade war, the demand for used soybeans, which is exported to China, also decreased, and this impacted the demand for this created a lot of uncertainty for soybean producers demand. There is a very well-established literature on estimating supply elasticities. For example, Roberts and Schenkler in their 2013 paper, they proposed using instrumental variables where they're instrumenting for futures prices using the lagged year yield shock. Hendricks et al. In the first 2014 paper, they counter the Roberts and Schenkler paper and suggest that instead of using instrumental variables, we should just go with using OLS because OLS is more efficient. And they suggest using the lagged year yield shock as well as the current year yield shock as the variables. And the paper says that adding these as control variables takes care of any endogeneity in futures prices. And as a result, results in OLS being more efficient compared to instrumental variable method. In the next paper in 2014, they used the satellite data to estimate agricultural supply elasticities for corn and soybeans in 3 Corn Belt states, including Illinois, Iowa, and Indiana, and they estimate the short and long-term elasticities for corn and soybeans. Kim and Oschini, in a recent 2018 paper, they argue that the price changes from 2005 to 2015 were mostly driven by demand factors. This was because of the adoption of renewable fuel standards, which resulted in a lot of price surge during that period. And as a result, they using this as a citing this as a exogenous price variation. They suggest that the futures prices during this period were exogenous and not endogenous, and as a result, they estimate the supply elasticities for corn and soybeans and for this time period. We will look at the estimates in these papers and compare it to ours in a couple of slides ahead. In a very recent paper, Thompson, what they do is they estimate how agriculture supply responds to extreme events such as the price surge during the 2005-7 period, the African swine flu fever, the trade war, the recession in 2008, and the COVID-19 pandemic. These authors, they are not estimating their own agricultural supply elasticities. They're only using the elasticities which have been estimated in the literature, and see how how producers would respond in the age responses for corn and soybeans. Specifically, they consider the performance of elasticity estimated by Goodwin and Mishra, Hendricks, and Kim in 2018. Their major finding is price changes associated with small area effects. For example, they show that even if the price changes as high as 50%, the area response is as low as 3%. Moreover, they say that this is for the own price elasticity effect, but they also say that it might be the cross price elasticity, which may be playing determining area in terms of response to acreage. For example, producers may be substituting corn with soybeans or vice versa. Now, after the pandemic, the USDA announced the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, and the purpose of this program was to assist farmers with pandemic-associated losses. USDA allocated $16 million separately to help farmers and ranchers, and farmers which suffered a price decline of 5% or greater are eligible for this program. Offered two rounds of payment. In the first round, they accepted applications from May through September 2020 and made a payment of $8 billion. In the second round, which is offered from April through October 2021, USDA has made a total of $19 billion. This has been as of May. So these numbers are still changing because USDA is still making payments under the round 2. But as of May end, the total was around $31 billion.
No question. Does it all relate to what happened in 2020? All those payments?
Yes.
And why did they allocate $16 billion and pay 31?
So they allocated $16 billion for the first round of payments, but then many of the farmers were not able to submit their applications. So they offered a second round of payments in 2021. This is just a snapshot of the total CFAP payments made for corn in. So this includes both CFAP 1 and CFAP 2. And not surprisingly, the payments are higher in Corn Belt areas, including Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Minnesota, and Nebraska. So with this paper, we are intending to make two important contributions. The first is to estimate supply elasticities using the on farmers' intended planting and actual things. What it does is that it provides us one additional data point, doubles our data set, thereby improving the statistical power and precision of our estimates. And the second contribution is we use the elasticities we estimate from the first point and then use 3 different related approaches to estimate the welfare damage as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and compare it to the payments USDA made under CFAP. With respect to our data sources, we are doing the analysis from 1980 to 2021. And for acreage and prospective planting data, extracting this data from the Cornell University libraries data sets. Prospective are the planting reports which are released every year in March, and these provide information on what are the farmers' intended plantings for that marketing year. So these are not the final acreage, but these are what farmers expect to plant in that year. The acreage report, which is released every year in June, they report the actual acreage which is planted for that year. So, prospective planting are the farmers' planting intention, and actual acreage reports are the actual numbers which are planted for that year. For futures prices, we are using harvest contract futures prices, which is trading 1 day before the USDA reports are released. And specifically for corn, because right now our analysis is limited to corn, we are extracting the data for the December contract. For yield data set, we are extracting the data from the USDA production sum reports, which are released every year in January, which provides us with the numbers for the actual yield for that marketing year. So this is just a snapshot of corn acreage over time. The actual plantings and the blue dots show the prospective plantings. As can be seen, both of them are going in flow together. However, the purpose of showing this is that if we remove the prospective plantings, the data set would be restricted and it would result in a very small data set compared to adding prospective plantings. This is just a linear regression fitted, so it shows that the supply curve to the acreage. Now, had futures prices not been endogenous, we would have used this estimate as a supply elasticity estimate. However, futures prices are considered endogenous because farmers may be using the futures prices, which would be trading when the crop is harvested to make their decisions of how much to plant today. But at the same time, whatever they're planting today might impact the futures prices for the harvest contract. Because there's a simultaneity issue, there's a concern of endogenous futures prices. And so this is the situation where quantity is a function of futures prices, the current year yield shock, and the time frame. But moreover, the beta S coefficient is our elasticity estimate. However, we cannot use this as an elasticity estimate because futures prices are endogenous. So we use the two-stage least squares estimation method, where in the first stage, we estimate futures prices based on the current shock, yield shock, and the time frame. And this is what has been done in literature, specifically on the paper.
What's S?
It's denoting supply. Moreover, before taking logs of the quantity of the futures prices, we deflate them with the seasonally adjusted consumer price index. So now the question is, what are yield shocks? Yield shocks are unexpected deviations from the yield trend, which occurs mostly due to random weather shocks. And these are the yield shocks which we are using the lagged year and the current year yield shock as instruments for endogenous futures prices. Now, how are we estimating these yield shocks? What we are doing is we are fitting a yield trend using a restricted cubic spline with 3 knots. And for example, we have 30 different observations in our data set. We eliminate the first observation. We fit the yield trend and estimate what would be the yield shock for the first observation by calculating the mean squared error for that observation. So these are really the data analysis. So conducting a robustness test for this analysis using 4 and not. Now, once we estimate our supply elasticity, the question is we have to use that elasticity estimate to estimate what would be welfare damage as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is just a picture representation of what might have happened during the pandemic. So this is the supply curve, and we're assuming that supply is constant in the short run, and the initial demand curve. Now, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the demand for automobile fuel decreased, and as a result, which resulted in the decrease in demand, which resulted in a decreased demand for corn. So what might have happened is that the demand curve might have shifted inwards, and because it had shifted inward, it resulted in loss of producer surplus, which is noted by the of that point A, B, C. So initially the producer surplus was in this region, and however, when the demand curve shifted inwards, the producer surplus left. So there was producer surplus. Herein we are assuming that the demand curve and the supply curves are linear; they're not curvilinear. So we need to know so in order to estimate the price difference, we need to know the changes in prices as well as the changes in quantity. So we are using 3 different measures for changes in prices and use those 3 different measures as to calculate the change in quantities using the elasticity which we estimated in the previous equation. So in the first method, we are using the price difference from January through April 2020 in our calculations. Because why we are using the price difference from January to April is that because in April, April is the period which US has used in the calculations when they were making payments for CFAP. In the second approach, we are using the price difference from January through August. August is the harvest month when the harvest starts for. In the last, where you observe price difference from January through November. November is 1 month before, just before the contract expiration. And we use 3 different price change measures to calculate the implied shift in quantity and estimate the welfare damage. These are our 2-stage least-square regression results for corn. All the first column, the first row represents our elasticity coefficient, and as can be seen, our elasticity coefficients are pretty consistent across the 3 different methods. Moreover, our weak instrument test satisfies the criteria that our instrument we are using is not weak, it's strong. And the Wu-Hoffman test, specifically when using 4 knots and 5 knots, it shows that OS is not as efficient as the IV method. Now, we use the BIC Bayesian information criterion to select the preferred choice of model among these different methods. And the model with 4 knots is our preferred choice of model because it has the lowest Bayesian information criteria. So this is how our results compare with the literature. Our elasticity estimate is around 0.7%. Hendricks et al., the coefficient is around 0.45%, and for Kim-Machine it's around 0.5%. However, we need to note that Hendricks et al. Is using the period from 2000 to 2015, and Kim-Machine is focused on period 2005 to 2015, as our analysis is from 1980 to 2020. Now, after estimating the elasticity coefficient, we are calculating the welfare damage using 3 different approaches. The first one is the price difference from January through April. According to this method, the price, it would have resulted in a welfare damage of around $4.7 billion. However, if we use a price difference from January through August, it would have resulted in a welfare damage of around $5.8 billion. Now, according to our last method, which is the price difference from January through November, 1 month before the contract expiration, our results show that the producers might have actually gained, but we need to know that when we're using the price difference from January through November, which is very so 2 things, we are increasing the time period. So we might be not only including the COVID shock, we might be including other seasonal demand and supply shocks which might be happening at that time. Also, November is like just 1 month before the contract expiration. So there's high volatility in the markets, and most of the traders are moving to the next contract. So it might have some influence on our results. But April and August are our preferred choice, are our preferred methods. Moreover, the actual payment which USDA made under CFAP is around $6.86 billion. So according to this, our estimates show that USDA was able to fully compensate farmers for any pandemic-associated losses, which is actually commendable given that USDA just launched that program immediately after pandemic and was able to provide compensate farmers.
So it's $6.8 billion for corn.
For corn, yes.
Because you said it was 31 for the whole.
For the whole, but
Right.
yeah. I'll have to double check. But we are just focused on this period, like,
What did USDA cut?
yeah, we need to look at it.
That's important.
Yeah. So all in all, our results provide agricultural supply elasticities using both prospective plantings and actual acreage. Previous studies have only used acreage in their analysis. Our elasticity coefficient is around 0.27%, which means that a 1% increase in corn's harvest futures prices increases acreage by 0.27%. All of our estimates indicate that USDA was able to fully compensate farmers as a result of the pandemic. And our next step is to expand our analysis to other commodities, for example, to understand what would be the impact of trade war as a demand shock for soybean supply, and to test for structural breaks in this analysis to see that the elasticity coefficients might be different in different time frames. For example, it might be during the late 1990s, but it might be different in the current period. So those are the next steps. Thank you. Any questions?
So trying to understand whether the prospect planting and actual acreage is actually the same concept, right? You're just treating that as a step, another data point, right?
Yeah.
But moving from prospect actual, it's not just price, but there's other things going on too, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's bad, you don't plant, right? Rice, you don't get water, then you don't plant. So in terms of just econometric equation that you have, I don't know, maybe interact with prospect planting dummy, then yeah,
Okay.
you're essentially running to a regression.
Yeah.
I just conceptually what that means.
Are you saying it's not the same information? It's not the same thing?
Same, I guess, in terms of responses, they're still slightly different, right? So the earlier season, you have a plan, it's not like react to the future price, but as season goes, there's other information comes in, other than price, right? So I don't know, it's a little bit hard.
All that information should be drawn up in the price. Like whatever it is that you're thinking, it's like it should be in the price. I mean, it should not be like
Yeah, and we are planning to do like a seemingly unrelated relations.
I don't know, I think it's odd that nobody's ever really used that.
Yeah.
I think you're right to question, like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But the idea, I think, of conducting that survey is like, if I can do that, what would you put there? If you believe them, it is for the stated preference, which is different than a revealed preference. And I think
True.
that's
Yeah.
what we're running into.
Yeah. And that's a fair point. The product price should capture all those weather shocks. So
Sure. Or like a physical shock. So whatever the shocks might be there, you're thinking about, like, I'm going to switch to a different line.
but yeah.
Any other questions, comments, suggestions? Yeah.
And do you consider any other bio in the last because it makes more production because
Can you repeat your question again?
so do you consider biofuel production and
Or like, you mean as a control variable?
ethanol production of the human that
Okay.
affects like increase in acreage in corn?
So, yeah, like, the increase in area, like, was, the last 10 to 15 years, there has been increased adoption of biofuels. So it might have resulted in some increase in acreage for corn. But, yeah, so we do not consider it per se in our analysis. So I'm still not following your question, actually.
Are you asking if the supply elasticity maybe varies with the introduction, but if there's structural break, if the supply elasticity changes when biofuels.
Okay, so that is the plan. So the next plan is to look for structural breaks. So it might be that as the renewable fuel standards were adopted and the increase in production of ethanol, elasticities might have changed. So we are planning to split our samples into different parts just to see if there are any structural breaks in our estimates.
I also think it's important to point out that implicitly, like what happened in the market, the corn price fell rapidly because there was an expectation that wanted to drive.
Yeah.
During a massive pandemic and a lockdown, there was less demand for fuel. So implicitly, The implicit effect that we're making is this demand shock is driven by.
Yeah.
So that's a good question.
Did you use perspective plantings separately? Like, because you use them together.
Yeah.
What if it suggests, I don't know, if that's.
We haven't
educated
used,
enough.
so
So your argument is, right, that they both hold information about expectation.
Yeah.
And so if the actual acreage reflects it and the perspective plantings reflects it, what is there a difference if you do them separately?
so we haven't done that separately, but that's a good question. We should try to do that separately. And we're also planning to run like seemingly unrelated regressions to see like how much information each of them is bringing. We did look at the interseason supply curves to see like look at the difference between prospective plantings and actually see if that has any like interseason supply city. But
So I think the question, if we're looking at the difference between
Yeah.
them, then I think your point makes sense. But because they're saying each one holds, right, yeah, it's cool.
Thank you.
thank you. So I think we only had 3 presentations because one of them got over last minute.
We're all done?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah.
I just think we gotta be careful about like what your estate actually says.
Yeah.
Because if they spend a lot more than $7 million, we should say. Yeah, I don't know why anyone is.
Right.
Just